In a world that feels increasingly loud and chaotic, we often search for a solid place to stand. We look for tools that can help us navigate the storms of our emotions and the complicated maps of our own lives. Most of the time, we look for these answers in things we can buy or in systems we can control. We assume that if we are organized enough or productive enough, we will finally feel at ease. But there is a quiet, invisible thread that runs through human history, and it is a thread made of words. This thread is poetry. Many of us think of poetry as something old and dusty, a task for a school classroom or something hidden away in the back of a library. We see it as a decorative thing, like a painting on a wall that has no real job to do. However, when we look closer at how people actually live, we find that poetry is not a luxury. It is a survival tool. It is what we reach for when we encounter the unlanguageable. These are the moments in life where regular conversation fails us. It is the feeling of a heartbreak that has no name, the sudden joy of a child's discovery, or the heavy weight of a memory we cannot put down. In these moments, we realize that the surface concept of poetry as just art is far too small. Poetry is actually a form of technology for the human soul. It is a way to encode deep truth into a small space so that it can be carried from one person to another across time and distance. There is a hidden assumption in our modern culture that to be valuable, a thing must be useful in a measurable way. We ask ourselves what a poem can do for our bank account or our career. We assume that because poetry does not build a bridge or fix a car, it is not essential work. But this ignores the structural reality of how we process our existence. We are not just biological machines, we are meaning-making creatures. We need language to understand our own stories. Without that language, we feel isolated and lost. We assume that our feelings are unique and that no one else has ever felt exactly this way. But the moment we read a poem that describes our specific pain or our specific wonder, that isolation vanishes. This is the hidden power of the written and spoken word. It provides a bridge of camaraderie. It proves that we are not alone. When we assume poetry is for elites or experts, we close a door on ourselves. The truth is that poetry belongs to the person writing a note in a lunchbox just as much as it belongs to the person standing on a stage at Carnegie Hall. It is a universal inheritance. When we examine the structural patterns of how poetry works in a community, we see that it acts as a space for apprenticeship and being human. Think about a crowded, dimly lit room where people are sharing their most vulnerable thoughts out loud. This is a pattern of collective witnessing. In a world where we are often told to hide our weaknesses, the space of a poem allows us to be brave in our vulnerability. This creates a specific kind of social glue. It allows an adult to listen to a teenager with genuine respect and a doctor to find wisdom in the words of a student. This structural pattern breaks down the hierarchies that usually keep us apart. It creates an intergenerational friendship where we realize we are all descendants of the same ancient need for expression. We are all trying to figure out how to live. When we see this pattern, we realize that poetry is not just about the words on the page. It is about the space that is created between the person speaking and the person listening. It is a collaboration of the heart. We can reframe our understanding of creativity by looking at it as a navigation tool rather than a performance. Many people are afraid to write because they think they are not good at it. They think that if they are not a poet, they have no right to write a poem. But if we see poetry as a verb, as the act of poeming our way through a problem, the pressure to be perfect disappears. Writing is a way to do the math of our own lives. Sometimes the equation is simple, and sometimes it is incredibly complex, but the act of doing the work is what matters. When we reach for language to describe our world, we are practicing a form of mindfulness. We are paying attention to the pinpoint of the human mind and the galaxies that exist there. This reframing allows us to see that everyone is a poet by nature because everyone has to maneuver through the mystery of living. We do not need a permit or a degree to pick up a pen. We just need the willingness to look at the world through a glass-bottom boat and see what is swimming beneath the surface. In our daily lives, we can apply this by recognizing that good things and bad things often come in groups of 3, and that is okay. We can prepare ourselves for the days when the wind is knocked out of us by remembering that this is how we remind our lungs why they like the taste of air. We can keep our own versions of rain boots and chocolate nearby, small rituals of care and comfort for the heartbreaks that will surely come. Most importantly, we can stop apologizing for the way our eyes refuse to stop shining. We can choose to be over-trusting or even a little bit naive if it means we stay open to the beauty of this funny place called life. We can look for the invisible threads that connect us to our neighbors and our ancestors. We can start small, perhaps by putting a secret note in a lunchbox or writing one line in a notebook before we go to sleep. These small acts of language are like stars in a dark sky, they give us a sense of direction when we feel adrift. As we move forward, it is helpful to think about the people who took us seriously before we were ready to take ourselves seriously. These are our horizontal and vertical mentors, the people who open doors for us into the house of wonder. We have the opportunity to be those people for someone else. We can be the listeners who make room for a small voice to sing. We can recognize that we are both descendants and ancestors at the same time, holding a responsibility to the past and a promise to the future. This is the work of being alive. It is a slow, spacious process of learning how to say thank you to the ocean for refusing to stop kissing the shoreline. It is about finding the star and starting over and over. Even when the world feels like it is crumbling like sugar, we can still stick our tongues out and taste the sweetness. We can decide that our minds will land on beauty no matter how many landmines erupt in a minute. This is not just a poetic idea, it is a way of walking through the world with our noses up, not to look down on others, but to smell for the smoke so we can find where we are needed most. It is easy to become cynical in a world that often offers us defeat on every street corner. But the antidote to cynicism is not just hope, it is the active search for language that makes us feel seen. Whether it is through a poem read on a screen, an animation watched on a phone, or a live performance in a dive bar, the doorways are always there. They are never locked. We only have to decide to walk through them. When we do, we find that the house of poetry has plenty of room for all of us, no matter our age or our background. It is a place where a medical doctor and a high school football player can find they are holding onto the same thread. This connection is what allows us to celebrate what we hold dear and to face the hard things with a bit more courage. We are all writers of our own stories, and we are all characters in a much larger poem that we are composing together. By reaching for the words that feel honest to us, we help the world become a little more languageable for everyone else. If you were to look into your own life right now and find that one experience that feels impossible to put into words, what is the first small secret you would tell yourself about it?